Hi, everyone. Today, more than ever, we have the tools and the technology to drive financial inclusion. What I am personally more excited about is that there is public and there is private digital financial infrastructure available. And most importantly, innovators in a region that are stitching these two together and helping not only include more people in the financial system, but are also improving products and services that the mass market has access to. I am Diana Narvaez, an investor with Flourish Ventures, and I'm speaking to you from Sao Paulo, Brazil, where I'm based out of. Flourish is an early stage fintech venture capital fund that invests in mission-driven founders and innovators, industry influencers who are working towards making a fair financial system. Thank you for joining today and welcome to our latest Flourish Conversations. These are frank discussions with fintech leaders on what takes to build a more equitable global economy. Our topic today is the rise of digital fintech infrastructure in Latin America and how it is serving as a tool to improve the financial health of households and small businesses. Joining me today are two very special guests. These are experts who have been collaborating in LATAM to exchange learnings, to exchange development and the advancement in the implementation of new regulations. So we have from Brazil, Bruno Diniz. Bruno is a co-founder and managing partner at Spiralem. It's a consulting company that focuses on innovation in the financial market. Bruno has done so much. He's a renowned speaker, an author, and has seen really all the corners of the financial system, just like Camila Orrego from Colombia. Camila is an expert in finance and tech regulation. And at Cuatrecasas, Camila advises national and international financial institutions as well as fintechs on everything that has to do with regulation. So prior to this interesting role, Camila also worked at the Colombian Financial Superintendents within the Innovation and Technology Group. So thank you, Bruno and Camila. Muito obrigada. Muchas gracias. It is such a pleasure to have you here today.
My pleasure, Diana. I think we're going to have a very good conversation here. And also great to be here with Camila as well.
Yes, the same by my side. It's a pleasure to be here and with Bruno and with Diana that early we saw last year here in Colombia.
Yes. Exactly. I was just going to mention that. So first, a forward-looking regulator that is open to innovation and pro-competition is a dream that we all have, right? Every ecosystem has that dream. And I am originally from Colombia, just like Camila. I moved to Brazil last year, and every day I'm seeing all these news from the central bank, the Brazilian central bank, with a new sandbox, a new product, a new feature for Pix, this digital currency, Drex. And it makes me so jealous. And it gives me so much hope as well, because I do want to see my home country and the rest of LATAM evolving as fast as Brazil. A friendly regulator obviously creates so much space for innovators and for to be able to create new products and serve better the mass market. So just wanted to share that at Flourish Ventures, we build ecosystems across the financial system, and we collaborate with the regulators, with policymakers, with industry leaders through both partnerships and grant funding. And like Camila, you just mentioned, last year, I was super lucky to travel with Bruno and his partner on a multi-country trip around Latin America, where we were able to gather intelligence on the state of regulation and financial services in each of these countries. So this is what and where we got to meet you, Camila. So I got to meet you. This is where I would like to focus our conversation today. So why don't we start with Bruno? Bruno, I've already mentioned about Brazilian Central Bank doing such an amazing job at promoting innovation, 80% of Brazilians are now included in the financial system due to PIX. Talk to us about the importance of this forward-looking regulator.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think the Brazilian journey is a benchmark for not only for the region but also for other countries around the world. And I believe that the initial point of that journey started around 2013. Because I think that all the steps that the Brazilian regulator took, they followed like a sequence. First starting with enabling type of regulations that really, in which really some other fintechs could raise and create their own business model to try to solve and tackle some of the problems, some of the urgent problems in the country. So we had like payment institutions regulation around 2013 that opened up space for players like Nubank. So the possibility for new challengers to come into the space and the scene and start delivering their services, that was the initial point of this conversation. And then we saw many enabling infrastructures as well. So PIX was a huge another piece of infrastructure. Then now we saw Open Finance, that's really under implementation right now, but we already implemented some parts of it. And it's already changing the landscape in terms of competition. And finally, we have the central bank digital currency, DREX, which is going to also create another wave of innovation in the country. So I really think that it takes time, and I think that the regulator is doing it in a sequencing process that makes a lot of sense. And I believe that we are going to continue to inspire some other countries on these aspects, and also fostering business locally, and also for the entrepreneurs that come to the country to create and design new business.
Amazing. Totally inspiring other countries. Camila, compared to Brazil, I think Colombia is 5-7 years behind. And again, I personally like to see a faster evolution. I think just in the last few weeks, there has been great traction from the government of Colombia in the right direction. So tell us more about these exciting things that are happening there.
Yes, like Bruno has mentioned, for Colombia, Brazil is an inspiration, and we will be someday, hopefully, to be at the same level as Brazil is in this moment. Last week, we had the first draft of the real payments regulation that the central bank issued. We are reviewing all those regulations. Yesterday, the central bank made a presentation in which they made some points regarding this new regulation. But at the same time, regarding the open finance, the superintendence of finance has been working for the last year regarding the structure and the governance of the open finance scheme in Colombia. So last week also, we received the last version of the external circular, that it's also for the next week, the deadline to receive all the comments. And we're hoping that in the last weeks of this month of August, we will have the final version of this regulation from the Superintendence of Finance. However, there are some points, really important points for the fintech, that they are not being like in this moment in the regulation that the superintendence is issuing. So we need to continue working for those kind of key points that are going to be really important. For example, in this moment, the regulation is saying that the traditional financial institutions are going to be the ones that are in charge of defining with criteria must comply the fintechs to access the open finance scheme. So that's something that it's not really good for the fintechs, because this is something that the financial institutions are going to decide to who and what kind of conditions must have the fintechs to access to its data. So we're trying, and I am talking that we, because I am working for to provide better regulations in the future, and this open finance regulation must be really good, have a really good governance. And I think that Bruno knows very well in the case of Colombia what are the problems in the government in this moment. But we are working for, and we will try to help the government and to help the fintechs to try everything, and to have probably in 2 years, I think we will have a really good open finance scheme.
Bruno, you had the chance in these multi-country visits that we did actually a year ago. You had the chance. We had the chance to sit with regulators, with incumbents, with the fintech associations all around LATAM, right? Chile, Mexico, Colombia. You went to Peru as well, Bolivia, Argentina. What have we? Tell us about the development of this conversation. Like what are we seeing outside of Brazil and Colombia? And to Camila's point, I guess, how can we influence so that the regulation happens and it happens the right way?
Yeah, fantastic. When we look at many of the benchmarks, I think decades ago, we used to look at what's going on in the US, what's going on in the UK or Asia. But right now, I think it's a very positive thing for other countries in the region can see a country in the region doing something about that. So, because in Latin America, we know the complexities. I think there are so many different aspects in each region, in each country of the region. And right now, I think that there is an intention for most of the countries on doing something about that. I think it's more feasible. I think that the ones that come first, just like Brazil did, creating a system like PIX, Brazil open sourced that, so other countries can also use that. When you look at a regulator, a government, building their own infrastructure, if that's the case. I believe that in most of the countries, they are more used to have like private sector types of infrastructure, not one led by a regulator, just like we have in Brazil. So there are so many different aspects to consider. But for sure, I believe that inspiration comes when you see your neighbor doing something that it looks feasible. It's not based on perhaps many other years and years of development, but something that just recently happened. And I believe that we are able to try to collaborate. And there are lots of conversations going on, not only Brazil with also Colombia regarding instant payment systems, open finance as well. So it's cool. It's cool to see that sometimes there are some factors in countries, for example, Mexico, that started earlier, but then they lost time in the middle of this process, and due to so many other things. And there's even things regarding to the government, and sometimes it changes, and sometimes the pace slows a little bit. But I still have faith that that's for the benefit of the population. So some of the countries, and there are very competent people doing good things inside the government and the regulators to try to turn around the situation and get these improvements for the population, for sure.
I was earlier today, I was at this event here in Sao Paulo where we had the amazing opportunity to hear directly from Octavio Damaso, the deputy governor of the central bank, talk about the history of what has happened and the evolution that has gotten us to where we are today. And it was really interesting to hear, I mean, for firsthand, how open-minded the regulator is and how willing they were to actually welcome the disruptors, the innovators, and inviting them to the table to talk about what they were actually building and how they were going to create solutions to disrupt the incumbents or to open up this concentration of power that 4 or 5 different banks had in the market. So it was pretty eye-opening. And actually, maybe I'd love to take one step back and hear from you, Camila and Bruno, maybe bringing this actually to like the ground level, right? A lot of our audience here are sitting all around the world, and we're talking about PICs and we're talking about open finance. And maybe if we share very exciting, I don't know, developments or like very tangible examples of what these things have done for Brazil, for Latin America. What have you seen, both Bruno, in Brazil, and maybe Camila, if you can share also as well some of these real life examples of how these technologies, this financial infrastructure has made the life of people better.
Well, Camila, if you want to start, I would cite the example of PICs, but Camila, if you want to start, we can for sure have a very good discussion on that.
Yes, I will say that we are trying to be as Brazil, probably to implement the PICs, the Colombian PICs. But I will say that in Colombia, the technology in the financial system and the thing that it has changed, it's been with the e-wallets. A couple of years ago, there was a startup that was called, and probably Diana, do you remember, Tapsi? That it was the first time that in Colombia you can ask for a taxi with the cell phone, and you will pay with a credit card or debit card. Where for those the co-founders,
this was before Uber, Camila.
Yes. This is something like before Uber.
Yep.
The founders of Tapsi found that most of the taxi drivers didn't have a financial, like a bank account or a financial institution in which they can pay for the rides that the people paid with credit cards or debit cards. So they, seeing that was a really huge problem in Colombia, they decided to create an e-wallet. And it was one of the first e-wallets in Colombia that today it's called Te Paga. And Te Paga was the first time for those drivers to be close to the financial institutions. So I think that those little things to being like in the financial inclusion in a country like Colombia have been really disruption with the technology. Because if you ask, last year, one of the last research that Banca Las Oportunidades made was to ask people, Colombian people, that if they have bank accounts or deposit accounts. And what the result was, they say that they didn't have bank accounts or deposits accounts, but they have e-wallet accounts. And here in Colombia, when you have an e-wallet account, at the end, you are having a financial institution in the back with a bank account really with the bank, but you don't know that. So that's something that it's being really disrupted here in Colombia with the technology, because has improved the financial inclusion, and that's something that it's really good. Probably the financial superintendents and now the central bank are going to be more like Brazil with the PICs and the standards of the open finance. And of course, those huge projects are going to help a lot in the financial inclusion. But in the technology, if I need to have one of the top things that has been really a change in Colombia, I will say that the e-wallets that help people to have to be in the financial system, but they don't know and they don't understand that, and that's really sad. But at the end, they are saving in a really good place and not under the bed.
It's cool. It's a private infrastructure as well. So when you look at, have entrepreneurs for do that. And in the case of Colombia, of course, there are regulations that enables these new players to come into play and offer those services. And I think that there also a thing about the interoperability of the different wallets, right? The QR codes interoperability in Colombia. There's all this conversation, and that's for sure transformational when you look in countries in Latin America, and looking in the case of Brazil, Pix, for example. But prior to Pix, we saw the creation of some of the companies with those small POS machines in Brazil. We have PagSeguro in Brazil, which was a very interesting case. It's very similar to what Square, which was now is called Block, did in the US. And then we see taxi drivers, even people in the streets with that type of mini POS machine. But then Pix come into play. And Pix is an infrastructure created by the regulator. So the regulator created the rails so that you have interoperability. So the different fintechs and banks are connected to the same infrastructure. So the money can float around from wallets, from banks, from fintechs, all over the place in the country. So that was transformational as well. Because prior to that, if I need to send money from one bank to another bank, some institutions would charge as much as $3, and that's sometimes more than the money that you want to send. So it makes no practical sense. And in Brazil, because the central bank created this infrastructure, they created also they made it mandatory for everyone in the infrastructure. If someone do a P2P transaction, it's going to be for free. So that was transformational. And then we see from people selling things in the street, all of them accepting Pix. It's a matter of just creating an alias, and you can create that out of your phone, your social security number, your email, and then is that someone just plug into their app and then type it, the alias, and the money goes. So that's pretty tangible. I think there's more other things in the background, like Open Finance. They're going to make life smoother in terms of experience. Not only that, we'll provide more information for the financial providers so that they can price the products in a better way. But Pix, something like that, which we're talking about payments, has been transformational for sure.
And I want to add something that you are saying, Bruno. Like here in Colombia, the e-wallets, like probably the two biggest ones that are Nequi and DaviPlata, have changed. And you remember something that it's like the people in the street that sells the fruit in the street in the corner. They're not receiving cash. You can pay them through the e-wallets. So those are little things that are changing. Now, of course, we don't have the peaks in Colombia now, and we have to wait until the central bank defined all the things, and we hope that it's going to be similar to Brazil. I don't know. I have my opinions, and I think that it's going to be harder here in Colombia because the technology that has the central bank, it's not so technological than the central bank in Brazil, and that's going to be some issues. But yes, I think that it's a really good thing to see informal commerce having not receiving cash, but they are now in the financial system.
Amazing. So even in Argentina, just to add a little bit, in Argentina we saw the same thing with Mercado Pago. So it's just like all over the region, and that's good. Not relying that much on cash in the region, so it's safe here, and that's a revolution for sure. But yeah. Diana, sorry for that.
No, it's great. This is great. I was gonna say that I moved to Sao Paulo about a year and a half ago, and I wanted to make an experiment and see how long how much time it was going to take until I needed to use cash. And the day has not arrived yet. I'm able to buy, even to give a donation or to give somebody money on the street using Pix, or buying my coconut water at the park or the beach with my phone. So it's really amazing how the system is available to everyone, and the high levels of adoption. And Bruno, I was going to ask you here. So I also heard this morning from the central bank directly that They've created a network, a group amongst all of the South American countries where the Brazilian Central Bank, as you said, has open sourced the technology and has openly said to all the regulators in South America, look, this is available for you. 100% the technology for PICs, whatever is available for open finance and what is going to come with Drex is fully available. Obviously, every country has its own peculiarities, but when we look at Colombia, Colombia is in a very interesting moment right now. Like Camila, you just said, they're trying to define, okay, what technology are we going to use? What do you see are the advantages or disadvantages of using or having the technology as a public asset, like in Brazil, where the Brazilians are the actual owners of it and not the private institutions? Like conflict of interest, like tell us a little bit about what could be the outcome there.
Well, I believe that solves a problem in terms of competition and creates a level playing field for big players and small players. So, for example, prior to PIX, when I was about to make a digital bank account, I would wonder, how much do you charge for an interbank transfer? Now, no one asks that anymore. So they are in the same level, the big bank and the small player, because moving money around is it's just like storing money and moving money around. So that's the basic features of any financial institution. Of course, there are investments and all this stuff. So I think that leveled the whole ground here. But the thing is, I'm quite aware that some countries and some regulators don't see that as a function of the regulator. So some regulators don't say, okay, I'm not here to create rails and maintain rails and do all of that. They need a very skilled people inside of the central bank to do that. And they have to, constantly be updating and making that work. Just recently, the central bank entered in a strike, and that can also affect the services at some level. And if now they are about to enter in a strike again, so there are the ups and the downs. I talked to regulators in places like Uruguay, and Uruguay is like a tiny country with less than 4 million people. So when you think about that, they said, Bruno, it doesn't make sense for us to create a system like PIX because it's expensive even for us to maintain that. And when you look at the size of the impact of the population that we have, that's something that don't make sense in an objective way. But, I think that there are the ups and the downs of that. I think Brazil is a huge country, and there are some other big countries in the region. And we have it's not like in the US, you need to have many different states and things are more complex. So I think it's easier to do. And I believe that the benefits out of this whole PIX implementation surpasses the problems that we might have, in my opinion, because I think that delivered a greater good and also establish a common ground for competition. But, each case is different in the region.
Yeah. Size of the market, peculiarities of the existing financial system. So back to Colombia, Camila, you've been in very interesting different roles, both in the public sector and now in the private sector. And I think your vision from being behind the curtains is super interesting to have seen that interaction amongst different players, right? The regulator, the incumbents, the fintechs. I'm super curious to hear more about how these conversations started and how they have evolved, how these different players interact with each other.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I'm going to use the information that you have said, Bruno, that it's, I think that in Colombia, the case in Colombia was that they saw in 2017, around 2017, they began to saw Brazil, UK, the States being really moving forward with the technology. And the superintendents open the innovation team, and with this opening, they opened the door to begin to talk about some topics regarding technology and regarding these new things that can be done. And I think that in that year, in 2017, 2018, was the beginning of the conversations between the public and the private sector. Not only and in that moment, the conversations were not only the traditional financial institutions, but also the new fintechs that were arriving to Colombia in that moment. In 2016, 2017 was the boom of the crowdfunding in Colombia. And I think that in all the region, and those like little conversations that at the end were like the result was the decree of the crowdfunding, and the result of that conversations also it's the sandbox that the superintendents have in this moment, and the possibility of the fintechs and the traditional financial institutions to prove with the technology to give services to the public in a different way. So I think that that's really like the history of that, what we are seeing now. And what we are seeing now in this moment is that the fintechs, they don't want to be near the regulator. They have fear of the regulator. And the financial institutions in some cases also, because they are improving and they are developing new technology. And what they are thinking is, if I am going to talk with the regulator, they are going to say, no, you cannot do that. For example, in the case of the PIGs, some of the financial institutions, the huge financial institutions in Colombia, they were developing their own system of the real payments system. And it was really good thing because the regulator didn't have those topics in their mind. So the private sector needs that necessity, and they were investing to have that system. Now that the public sector is going to be through the central bank, we have to see how it's going to be the role of the central bank, because as you say, Bruno, it has its ups and its downs. And in the case in Colombia, in my opinion, we have a really good central bank, but it's like an iPhone 2 and in this moment we're in an iPhone 15 or almost in an iPhone 15 in technology in technology topics. So that's going to be really a huge process to take the central bank and to take all the banks in the system, in the rails of the system, of the payment systems, to be advanced and to be in a really good level. Because if not, it's going to happen what Bruno just said, that it's all the time, every year you need to adjust the regulation because the technology is developing every single day really fast. So if you are not developing at the same time, sometimes it's really hard. But if you are not issuing some regulation that adjust the developing of the technology, it's going to be something that it's going to use only for a couple of years, and then it's going to be really small or real not functionally in the system. So I think that it's really important to work with the private and the public sector, because the fintechs have really good information of how they are doing and how they are using the technology in a different way of the financial institutions. And also the financial institutions are using the technology in another aspects of the traditional ways. And probably the regulators, they don't know those new things or new business models. And it will be a really good thing to have those information for the regulator, so the regulations and the public policy would be more strong and be really good thing for the public at the end, not only for a couple of years.
Just to add one thing on that, you just mentioned that the banks were creating like a system for instant payments among themselves. That's something that used to happen in countries, even in Brazil. There is an organization that created by the banks that provided the infrastructure. But the problem is when the banks create their own infrastructure, sometimes they would charge a toll for the fintechs to join the system. So that's another point when you compare like the private structures and the public ones that like pigs we have in Brazil. So that's an important point to consider.
Yes, and also just to add for that point, that's a really good point, and that's something that it's happening now in open finance. That the banks are the ones that they are saying to the fintechs which one or what requirements they need to come to be with the bank, with the data of the bank. So yes, I agree with you, Bruno, and it's something that it has its pros and its cons, but at the end it's something that it's better if the government, and if it's something public, the regulation and the system it's public, but also it's important to have the information of the private sector, because if they don't have the information, they don't know the scope of what they are doing and for who they are working for, the regulations and the public policy.
Perfect.
I think we're gonna have to do another one of these on open finance. But Bruno and Camila, as regional and foreign investors are more and more looking into LATAM, they're attracted not just to our talented entrepreneurs, but also to the great opportunity to disrupt this very old-fashioned, outdated financial system that sits in huge pools of profit. What advice would you give to both founders as well as investors, but those founders that are in the process of disrupting or thinking about products to disrupt the system, and investors that are looking to evaluate and to invest in our region? What kind of words of advice would you give to these two important segments?
Well, in my case, I would say don't underestimate the local complexities, and that's case by case and country by country. Each country got a different complexity. And even in the case of Brazil, there is a saying that Brazil is not for amateurs. It's just like, it's hard. There are plenty of opportunities, and some of them, of the complexities here are, opportunities in disguise, in fact. But you cannot underestimate, and even some entrepreneurs in the region. I see a lot of Mexican companies, even Colombian companies coming to Brazil, and not fully understanding that the dynamics change a lot. It's a country within the same region. There are some cultural aspects that make us Latin Americans, but there are other specific aspects on behavior and regulation that change the whole thing. So I would be very mindful of that, because there are for sure many opportunities, but you need to handle that in a very laser focus way.
And I agree, and I will add something that happens in Colombia, that it's important to know the history and the culture in Colombia. Sometimes like a couple of months ago, I was talking with a French investor, and he was saying like, no, that's not possible. And I was like, yes, those kind of things can happen in Colombia, because we have a history, and it's important to know this and these and these things for the business model, because we have a history. It's not something the Ponzi schemes here are really huge and are giving some damage to the population. So we need to protect them. So, but it's something that it's really cultural, and to know the history, how or where the public policy were created, or with which information was created that public policy. And additionally, I will say to them that don't be fear to the regulators. In some cases, it's really important to, if you have a really good business model, and if it's going to be something disruptive, and if you really believe on that, it's better to begin to talk with the regulators since the first parts of the project, and not at the end, when you have created and you have invested a lot of money and a lot of time. And when you talk with the regulator it's going to see it to be in the first stage. So it's better if you begin with the regulator to talk, and at the same time build the business model. And I think that's going to be a really thing. It's going to be really helpful at the end for the result of the project.
And I will add to that to also reach out to amazing and experienced leaders in fintech and regulation like you both for all of that advice as well. What a great discussion about the evolution of digital financial infrastructure in LATAM. I know we're past the time, but I really enjoyed these, and I hope that you also did. It sounds like we need a part 2, so stay tuned for another invite. It's always a pleasure to exchange ideas with two friends and experts in the space. Thank you so much, Camila and Bruno, for joining us today.
No, thank you for the invitation. It was a really good conversation, and we are waiting for the second part.
Fantastic. Looking forward to the next time. And it was a great chat for sure.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for joining us today. For questions regarding today's discussion, Flourish Ventures, or any of our portfolio companies, please email us at events@flourishventures.com. Thank you, and until next time. Ciao, ciao.